Welcome to the program In the Know. I'm David Winstead, and I hope you'll enjoy today's discussion. We have two officials from the City of Rockville with us. We have Craig Simoneau, who's Director of Public Works, and then we have Bryan Barnett-Woods, who's Director Chief Transportation Planner for the City of Rockville. So I hope you'll find this discussion of interest. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have time to chat. Obviously, Rockville is the third largest city in the state of Maryland, and I looked recently, you all were ranked the second best city in Maryland to live in. I think the winners may be Annapolis, but you all came in two. But I thought significantly, Forbes magazine ranked you all as the 24th best place to live in the United States a couple of years ago. So you're obviously doing a good job. Congratulations. But why don't we start by, we're going to talk a lot about what's going on in the city from the public works, facility, transportation side. But Craig, why don't you start off your background, just a few minutes, and how you got to Rockville?
Sure, David. I came up and was a commissioned officer in the United States Army. I was an engineer officer, so I split my time during my active duty time between the real troop type units and the Corps of Engineers and the engineering type things. Corps of Engineer, I was a deputy district engineer in Chicago. I was a public works director my last job at Fort Monroe, Virginia. And that was a natural slide for me as a public works director at a military installation to come to Rockville. And so I've been with Rockville for 17 and a half years since I retired from the Army.
Oh, that's great. And Bryan, how about you? I know you've been with the city for a couple of years, right? But
sure. So it'll be 2 years this August. Prior to that, I was working with Prince George's County Planning Department.
Oh, okay.
I was the supervisor for their transportation planning section.
Right.
I'm a transportation planner by trade, and I focus a lot of my energy and effort on walking and bicycling and transit use, really making sure we have multimodal transportation, well, right now in the city of Rockville, but really wherever we go.
Right. Well, it's an interesting time, isn't it? Because it's sort of post-COVID. And we're seeing both the public sector. I saw recently that the Secretary of the VA, being very aggressive, has asked federal employees to be back to their workplace 3 days a week. The federal requirement was only 1 day a week. I assume you guys have a requirement. I mean, telework is certainly a part of the way the city of Rockville operates, where the public safety probably is not the area. But what's been the impact of the experience of people working from home really exclusively for 2 years, and now having the ability to be mobile and to get either by transit or bikes or cars back to their jobs? How is this transition playing out in Rockville?
Well, from the employee's perspective, especially in the city and in our department in particular, we have kind of two types of employees. We have the employees that have to come to work every day regardless of COVID, regardless of a storm, and those are a lot of those are blue collar, hands-on people. They work our water system, they work our sewer system, they fix potholes in streets. They have to be there. They collect refuse and recycling. They got to be there. So we have that group that worked through this the whole time. We had to do some pretty creative things. One of them was we actually split our teams into two crews, and we made sure that the red team and the blue team didn't work together, even on an overtime call, so that if someone contracted COVID, they wouldn't pass it to the team, and we could always make sure that one team and the other team were separate, if you would. At the height of it, we did that. But the rest of the workers, a lot of the professional workers, the engineers, the planners, the environmental specialists, we had a very quick transition to working from home. And it's pretty incredible some of the things we did. We were already working on electronic approval of permits and documents, and we sped that up very quickly. And now you don't see a lot of people coming into City Hall, coming to our counter to drop off plans. The Mylar plans that used to come, we used to have couriers coming daily to drop those off. It doesn't happen anymore. It's all electronic. We do electronic drawings, electronic permit, and electronic plans. Everything's signed electronically now, and of course the industry loves that because they can say, but our workers transition to work from home, and to some degree, I tell people in our department, we've got more efficient working, teleworking. The virtual environment, because we work a lot on drawings and documents, we can bring them up in the virtual room and somebody can edit them as we're doing it and showing drawings. Previously, you had to go in the conference room, cue it up on the screen. Everyone had to, and now, to some degree, we're even more efficient. So we've settled into the people who are telework eligible. The requirement is 2 times a week you come into work.
Okay, so that's a pretty good balance.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 2 or 3 times is sort of what we're seeing. Brian, so nobody was going anywhere for 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Rockville is very blessed by its transit, right? You've got the metro station right in Rockville, and you've got a walkway coming to the town center and that kind of thing. I assume that, mobility was just moribund for most of those 2 years. But now that we're back, now that COVID's been lifted, if you will, what are you seeing? Are you seeing that the commuting is less because they're only coming to work 2 days a week? Are you seeing more people are actually feeling safer on bikes and coming to work on bikes? I think one thing that we are all concerned about as transportation background people is what's happened to Metro, because the ridership on Metro has just dropped 50%. We saw yesterday discussions about how they're going to get federal funding. But what's sort of the current state of play in mobility in the city?
Sure, great question. So yeah, definitely in 2020, travel across the board for all modes plummeted. And we've seen an increase in people coming back, whether they're driving or taking transit. Certainly not to the levels pre-2020, but if we look at driving, we're looking at inching up closer and closer to where we saw maybe 2019 levels. Still not pre-pandemic. One thing we've seen is that kind of the amount of trips hasn't changed. People are still going places. They're still going to the supermarket. They're still going to work. They're still running errands. But the times at which they travel is a little different. The peak hour, which is something we use often for tracking congestion and making sure that the roads have sufficient capacity, hasn't been as steep as it was prior to the pandemic, but certainly it's now flattened out and it's gotten a longer peak, so to speak. As for walking and bicycling, certainly during the pandemic, when people were working from home or when they had free time, more people were out walking about just as an excuse to go out and exercise. And a lot of those habits have stayed, where we see people who are walking for more errands, we see people who are bicycling for more errands. And I think that's a great shift. Certainly not as much as I'd like to see it happen, but we're all working toward a point where we can see more people and have more activity essentially from walking and biking modes.
Oh, very good. And both of you guys worked with the council and your team on both the town center master plan, correct, and on the metro. A few years ago, you did a Rockville Metro master planning process, correct?
Yeah, and actually, David, we have 2 metro stations in Rockville. We have the
Right.
Twin Brook one and
Twin
the
Brook.
Rockville one. Yes,
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And I know both, candidly. In my background years ago, I did a bit of zoning work, and I know, candidly, both have opportunities.
Yes, they do.
There's parking, a lot of parking around Twin Brook. You have HHS as a major tenant, right?
Yes.
Right there in Twin Brook, and same in Rockville. You've got surface parking around the metro station. So what's the impact? Well, let's start with that metro work that was done, the master plan. What impacts does that have in terms of what you guys are trying to implement now?
Well, that study is still not completed.
Okay. So
There was a few options developed,
Right.
and the mayor and council eliminated a few, but they're still out there trying to figure out what might happen around the station. There was a private development that was switching hands at the time.
Got it.
And they wanted to go see what was happening there. So it's still kind of in play. It's still kind of waiting for a final. But there's a lot of discussion about, because Route 355 goes right by the Rockville station,
Right.
and because we have a pedestrian bridge over 355, they all came into the equation about how to make all that safer, in addition to trying to develop some of that private development on that parking area. So it's a little bit complex there, because it's sandwiched between a neighborhood on the backside, the commercial development, 355, and we're in this period of what's happening with office space et cetera. So it's still not finalized. But the Twinbrook station also has had some development already happen on it, and there's some consideration to maybe more development happening around the Twinbrook station.
Well, that's great. On the town center plan, Brian, what elements of it came out and sort of that you all saw as new opportunities in terms of pedestrian safety or bike lanes or that kind of thing? Was there a lot of output that?
Sure. So the town center master plan is still an ongoing plan right now.
Okay.
And what they've been working on so far is their public engagement and really spreading the word and getting suggestions and recommendations and comments from residents and business owners and visitors about what they want to see in town center. And one item that was pretty clear through all the public meetings they had was, we really want to make it safer to walk places. We want to see improvements to the shared use paths. We want to see the type of amenities that are supportive of walking and bicycling in that area, which I think is great. On top of that, the Rockville Metro Station visioning plan, which Craig was speaking about earlier,
Right.
In addition to identifying the best ways to cross 355 to the Metro Station, it does include a lot of opportunity for development, both residential and commercial, in those areas surrounding the Metro Station. And from a multimodal transportation perspective, that's great because having the place where people work and the place where people live or the place where they access transit close together is one of the best ways to reduce congestion, because you're essentially eliminating that extra automobile trip that now can be a walking trip or a bicycling trip or a transit trip.
Right.
I really look forward to seeing the town center plan kind of as it progresses, because it is in the center of Rockville, and it connects to a lot of the neighborhoods, and there's a great bicycling network that's already existing through the Carl Henn Millennium Trail, the Twinbrook Connector Trail, and being able to see how we can get people from the town center to the rest of Rockville, whether it's walking or bicycling, is going to be a great amenity for the city.
Right. That's great. And I also knew that not too long ago you all asked ULI to come in for a tap, and I happen to know some of the people that served on that advisory group. They seem to, provide some constructive input. I think some of it was looking more uniformly at how to integrate particularly the underdeveloped. Wasn't that basically their?
Yeah, and one of the big recommendations of that ULI TAP report was a road diet in our town center on North Washington Street and East Middle Lane. And that got a lot of attention, a lot of interest. And in fact, right now we're finishing that project. And we're taking away lanes and repurposing them. So instead of having two travel automobile lanes in each direction, it's going to be one, plus some parking, plus bike lanes and better sidewalks and things like that. So literally that's in the finishing stages right now. And you can see, David, the ULI TAP report, plus we have our Vision Zero plan that the Mayor and Council have approved, plus we have an approved bikeway master plan. This is all good for us because even going into this town center master plan update that you asked about, we already had some things in the works. We already had some ideas of what to do, and now we're looking at refining things and asking the residents what can be done. So we're not starting from scratch, if you would. Having the advantage of the Vision Zero plan and the bikeway plan and this ULI TAP report, we've kind of already had a head start on some of these things.
That's great. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll get back into the Vision Zero and then talk specifically about some of the projects that were mentioned. So this is David Winstead and the program In the Know, and we'll be back in a minute.
Baby, you see, you're so right for me, and I'm right for you. I love the things you do, like sweet tasting wine. Your lips are so divine. Your loving turns me on. My lonely days are gone. That's why I'm never gonna let you go. Never gonna let you go. Babe, I'm never gonna let you go. No, no, never gonna let you go. Baby, never gonna let you go. Never gonna let you go. Babe, I'm never
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
gonna let you go.
Welcome back to the program In the Know. I'm David Winstead, and we have two great guests here today. With Craig Simoneau, Director Public Works for the City of Rockville, and Bryan Barrett-Woods, who is the Head of Transportation Planning for the City of Rockville. So let me ask, let's start with an initiative I know that's still in play. I know that the county executive is very big on BRT. When he was on the council, I had a chance to work with him on that project. But how do you see BRT impacting Rockville, both linking 355, Veers Mill? Can you describe a little bit about the future of BRT and what positive impacts it will have?
Well, I'll start, David. The Veers Mill line is further along,
Right.
but we're deep into planning with Montgomery County on the 355 line. That's going to, obviously, 355 goes right through Rockville. A lot of commercial establishments, businesses right off there, and we're deep into figuring out just how much BRT we can get and how exclusive lanes we can get and how it's going to impact businesses and then how it meshes with our master plan. We had an aggressive master plan that talked about bike lanes and a cycle track along 355, and when you overlay it all, you can't get everything that everybody wants. And that's the challenge we've been working out the last several months with Montgomery County and their consultants, and how exactly you mesh all this together and how to make it all work. And they're getting on that line, they're getting close to 35% design finalized.
Wow.
So it's moving along, and some of the more detailed planning is moving. And then secondly, they have the Great Seneca Line initiative with a couple other BRT lines, one of them going up.
That was originally called the CCT?
I think one of the lines has morphed from that.
Okay.
Yes, from CCT. But there's a few lines that they're considering there.
Right.
One of them that we're looking at closely now is along Shady Grove Road, and that's just on the city edge. But we have a development that's coming in, Shady Grove Innovation District, that's right there, and we had the opportunity to start planning a BRT stop right there now. So there's a lot of BRT planning that is starting to mature and starting to move forward further from the days back 5 years ago that you referred to.
Right. And I think the legislature just got $6 million, I believe, for the BRT 355 of state funding, I think. And I know that the county's been trying to get federal funding with
Yes.
this increased amount of money that's on the street
Yes.
with the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Bryan, talk a little bit about, given the BRT, what are the considerations from a pedestrian standpoint? I know,
Sure.
if you're planning for that in the middle of the road, it's one thing, right? If you're planning that curbside, it's another. What are some of the implications and options?
Sure. So one of the things that we're looking at when we're looking at these plans that are developing with Montgomery County is ensuring that people are able to access the BRT at any of the stations, whether they are stations that are in the middle of the street or stations that are on the edge of the road. And so at least when we're looking at the Maryland 355 BRT plan so far, there are shared use paths and cycle tracks, which are a separated bicycle lane from the motor vehicle lanes, and they're really safe, and they help improve safety not only for bicyclists but also for motorists and for pedestrians as well. And so having a facility that essentially follows the BRT line the entire way is going to help ensure that everyone who's using the BRT, whether they're taking a bus to get to a bus stop to then walk to a BRT station, whether their BRT stop is near their destination, they'll be able to get to it safely. And having that wider sidewalk, having that wider shared use path, and those separated bike lanes are going to be able to make sure that happens. So I think where we are right now, I think we're in a good position. We're making sure that we're providing for the facilities to help accommodate the needs of people who are trying to go to the BRT but aren't maybe being dropped off by someone else.
And what impact will BRT? I know the concept is, shorter trips, but more stops, right, than metro, right, or than light rail. So the city must be looking at it as a bit of a stimulant, right? You bring people up 355, they are in the city of Rockville, there are options for either housing or amenities or work or more, right? That's sort of the thing. It helps you fill out that corridor, if you will, correct?
Yes, and it was also a means of, we were getting congested in certain areas, and
Right.
we were having intersection capacity problems in certain areas, and where the victim or beneficiary of all the development happening north of us, because a lot of it's used to try to come down into the DC and along the Metro line, and we're at the terminus of the Red Line.
Right.
And so that was pre-pandemic seen as a way to encourage growth to continue, but not expand our traffic network, except for transit, using transit to expand it rather than the road network here. And so that was one of them. Now, post-pandemic, we're all waiting to see what happens. Obviously, it's going to help that, but you're correct in that we're trying to make this such that you can take a local bus to a BRT and then to the Metro, or just the local bus to the BRT, or just the
Right.
BRT, or your bike, or walking. And that way there, people can come to Rockville, and perhaps you have a family that's a married couple, and they don't have to have two cars anymore.
Right.
Matter of fact, if you live in a transit-oriented development, you may not have to have a car at all.
Right,
Because you may have the shopping center right there. So we're trying to make it so that people, when they move here, when they think about taking a job, they have options, and it's not all car-centric.
Right.
And I think the BRT is going to be the gap that helps us do that.
Right, and it also makes a safer street, right?
Correct.
Because if you put it in the middle, you have that median. The 355's got a lot of volume on it, right? The other side of it, as I remember from our discussions a number of years ago, was it's much cheaper. I think it's a third, right? It's a third of what a light rail would be.
Oh, absolutely. Light
Yeah.
rail is.
And so if you have right-of-way and you're looking at how to deliver some more transit, BRT is a better option in most cases, right?
But as you know, in your white Flint looking,
Yeah.
there's limited right-of-way, and there's all these, everybody's seeking room to put something there,
Right.
and it's got to be apportioned correctly to make sure all the everybody's getting there. So that's the challenge when trying to do it in our area, because we're built out.
Right. Let me ask you, again, you've described, the relationships you have to have. You're a city, third largest in Maryland, growing, popular town to live and growing, and yet you're in the middle of county-managed streetlights, state-managed roads, municipal roads of Rockville. And, how do you manage all that? And one of the things that I've got to tell you, my wife, if she were on the show, would scream about it, is, I think most people are very intolerant of inefficient traffic signaling. When you're sitting on 355 and you're just started up at a speed limit, and then the next red light hits you, you go, wait a minute, I'm driving the speed limit, I proceed. So how do you coordinate all this to try to improve flow, basically, when you've got that situation? You've got the state, SHA, you've got the county, and you got Metro. But how does that balance out? How do you manage that?
Well, that's a good question. We in the city of Rockville mostly have city roads and state roads.
Right.
There's no real county roads, but the county operates the state signals on state roads. So there you go, all three parties. And what they've done on signals over the years is they've arranged such that we maintain some of the state signals on roads where it's more efficient. Because our road is the main road, we'll maintain a few of their signals, and they'll maintain a few of ours,
okay.
so that the timing can be done in the
I
best
gotcha.
flow. And so we have this agreement where we've exchanged a few signals, and that's one level of way we're doing it. But another
Right.
way is a lot of communication, David.
Right.
We have been communicating more in the last 2 or 3 years with the state and the
Well, that's
county
good.
in my 17 years that I've been here, and we actually have a quarterly meeting now with the state, and
Right.
Bryan attends that every quarter, and we're talking about specific intersections, specific
That's right.
improvements, and we're down to that level of detail talking to them.
Right.
And we're talking to the county. We also have a quarterly meeting with Montgomery County and their DOT in Gaithersburg, and we're talking about things that are of common interest and where we can work together and how we can be more efficient here. So the level of communication has increased significantly in the last few years.
Well, that's great to hear. When I was at Maryland DOT as secretary, they took me downstairs and said, "You have a state car." And I looked at it, and on the back plate there was a big Maryland seal, and it said Secretary of Transportation. I said, "Get that off." I saw myself on the Beltway with all this congestion and furious people, kind of, and seeing me and just, taking me on anyway. But congestion is a real nuisance. It's a part of obviously dealing with the demand of the automobile and existing capacity and traffic. So that's very helpful what you're doing. I think the more that interjurisdictional coordination and the flows of traffic and signaling, the better off.
Yeah, and Bryan, because he's the Vision Zero coordinator, he's working the metrics from what our Vision Zero analysis have said. We've found the 5 most dangerous intersections, if
Right.
you would, high injury network. And Bryan's working with the state. 4 of the 5 are state intersections.
Oh, okay.
And so Bryan is at the point of the spear, trying to work with them on details of what they can do to help on those intersections, even though they're not our intersections.
Interesting. Well, Bryan, let's talk a little bit about Vision Zero, because the city has a great record in that regard. The council looked at a plan, right, and approved it. You all are implementing it. Telling us what's planned and what's been implemented. And the bottom line is, obviously, you want to save lives on the road system. You want to calm it. In Montgomery County, the municipalities have this issue, right? Because most of them have town centers, and they're concerned about traffic and how to keep speeds down and keep pedestrians safe. So, give us some cases of Vision Zero successes in the city of Rockville.
Sure. So the Mayor and Council of Rockville adopted and approved their Vision Zero plan in the summer of 2020. And so we've been, since then, doing what we can to help implement this plan. And there's a variety of Vision Zero action items. Some of them are long-term items and they're ongoing. So like coordinating with M.SHA and the county is a long-term ongoing project that we're always working with them to say, look, here are the intersections that they're state-maintained intersections, they're state-owned intersections. We really need to see how these can be improved. And we've already identified them for you, so let's see what can happen. And then they go off and they work on those. Additionally, we've worked on projects ourselves along roadways. So for instance, Maryland Avenue, we added bicycle lanes and we removed 1 travel lane in the direction of town center. And we implemented that, and the construction was complete in December of 2021. Since then, there has been a reduction in the number of speeding tickets issued by the camera by 70%.
Really?
And so eliminating that extra travel lane has made that roadway much safer, not only to give space for people to bike, but it makes it more comfortable for people walking, and it makes it safer for people driving, because now everyone's able to drive the speed limit, or they're more encouraged to do so. And so that's been a great success. Looking at sidewalk gaps and making sure that, where are the sidewalk gaps that are closest to schools, where are the sidewalk gaps that are closest to commercial areas or the town center or businesses, and making sure that people don't have to walk in the roadway and that they have that space to do so, so that cars are not in conflict with the pedestrians or with bicyclists who may be.
Right.
And so kind of identifying those gaps, prioritizing them, and now we're in that step where there are no more simple projects. So we really have to take a more detailed look at, is it feasible to build this sidewalk? And what are the challenges of building it here versus looking at a street that may be the next block over? So we're looking at those. We work with the Montgomery County Safe Routes to School coordinator and their team, and we try and support schools in the city of Rockville for participating in things like bike to school day and walk to school day, to make sure that students are getting not only educational materials for how to put on a helmet properly, or how to check their brakes properly, but also like free goodies so that they're excited to do so. Similarly, we participate in Bike to Work Day to kind of help share that information and education with the public about, bicycling is a good opportunity not only for just regular errands and commuting, but you can do it safely and conveniently. And here's some things to help make that happen. So we try and go on all fronts.
And there's been plenty of funding, it seems, right? Through both, obviously, the city budget, but also state and federal grants are out there for Vision Zero. A lot of the billions that they appropriated for the bipartisan infrastructure bill is targeted at Vision Zero, correct?
Yeah, there is a lot more grant opportunities out there because of the bipartisan act. And Bryan is our point person in transportation to apply for them. So we have seen a pretty good uptake in trying to apply for grants and get grants to help fund this Vision Zero and the transportation need.
That's great. So I have one final question, if we would. Obviously, you addressed earlier, Greg, that your department is really done well, and COVID helped in sort of automating systems so people can get permits quicker and that kind of thing. I know that Rockville's basically 70,000 residents now, but the plan, you all had a 2040 plan, I believe, that was done. It shows that by 2040 you're going to be over 100,000 people. I assume everything you're doing now anticipates that kind of desire to live in Rockville, right? And so what's your sort of, in a brief description, what's your sort of vision by 2040 what Rockville will be like?
Well, we got to transition to be more transit-oriented. Simply because there's a huge demand on the residential market, as you probably know, and the office space is just not there,
right.
Except maybe for the science and bio tech area. A lot of people still looking for residential homes, so we got to be able to accommodate
and affordable
them.
housing.
And affordable housing,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
and we got to be able to accommodate them.
Yeah.
And we're waiting for the transportation to come back to pre-COVID levels, but we got to make sure that we can take not only what's coming to Rockville, but again, what's coming north of us. If it's trying to go into DC, a lot of it has to come through us.
Right.
And so we got to make sure that we can do it. And I think making it more walkable, more bikeable, and more transit-oriented is the key, because there's no room to put more lanes on these roads,
right.
as you know.
Yeah, that's right. Bryan, your thought? Do you think, I mean, obviously it's going to be a more pedestrian-friendly and safer community, downtown access, but on the bikes you seem to be handling. Any other thoughts in terms of?
Sure, yeah. Like Craig was saying, we expect Rockville to grow. It's a great place to live, and people are going to want to move there. And one of the things that we try and do, with multimodal transportation, walking, driving, biking, transit, is making sure that we can accommodate those needs, and really being able to have trips that can be walking or bicycling will help kind of reduce that dependency on private automobiles, and it'll make it not only more active, but we could have more affordable housing because we have less costs that are transportation related.
Right.
We can have more activity in certain areas because we're able to get more people because of the walking and bicycling scale up much better than automobiles do. And so I think by moving forward with thinking about it, how do we make it safer and how do we make it more efficient? The real trick to making that happen is having multimodal transportation, and that's what we're trying to do. Oh,
that's great. Well, I predict that you all are going to be moving up from 24th best place in the country to the top 10.
It's a great
But
goal.
thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I think it's being the largest municipality in the county, the third largest city in the state, it's nice to hear the vision you all have and the delivery of services. I mean, you really are anticipating everything. I love what I heard about the coordination and the sharing to get better flows of traffic. But thank you again for joining. This is David Winstead, and thank you for joining In the Know, and we'll see you soon.